Well, welcome back to our weird little video today. Where we're going to talk about Australia's favourite home away from home, Scotland. We're not going to try any bad accents, although before we started filming, we thought about it, and I don't think we're going to go down pretty well.
Brady, can you do a Scottish accent?
That's all right. Although, if we've got any Scottish viewers, please let us know how bad that was.
The Scots in my blood. The Scots in my blood.
As much as English is in my blood, mate, like 10 generations ago.
Well, 2.
Okay, all right. Anyway, let's get into the video. As you probably would have known if you're an avid follower of Australian football, and if you're watching this channel, we assume you are. Scotland, what's go with the water over there? I think a lot of our Aussies like signing with clubs over there. We already had Cammy Devlin and Nathaniel Atkinson at Hearts, Tommy Rogic over in Celtic, although he'll be moving on. And only in the past couple of days, Kye Rowles and the other fella from Mariners or MacArthur just linked up with a club over there.
Lewis Miller. Yeah, he's pulled a Cammy Devlin. MacArthur have. He hadn't even really been announced for MacArthur, and they've sold him on. So Mariners have been stitched up out of a transfer there. But Keanu Baccus as well recently has been signed by St Mirren. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that's right. Yep.
That's 5 pretty talented young Aussie footballers heading over to Scotland in the last kind of 6 months. It's it's pretty big for Australia. Obviously, there's a bit of a history between Scotland and Australia. I'm sure people know this, but big names like Mark Viduka playing for Celtic. Actually, he's the reason I'm a Celtic supporter. Mark Viduka at Celtic. You had Craig Moore and Muscat at Rangers, Scotty McDonald at Celtic. We've also had, the McGowans. Aaron Moy spent some time over in St Mirren before he came back to Australia.
Jamie McLaren was at
more recently
one of the Edinburgh clubs.
He was at Hibs.
Yep.
And we've had Jackson Irvine. He kind of took off in Scotland before he went elsewhere. So Australia's got definitely a long history of connecting with Scottish football. But what do you think is making it such a link right now?
Gosh, right now, well, I don't really know what the fascination with Scotland is. I mean, it's not a bad league. I mean, it's not a top league. I mean, I've been critical on this show before about how if you've only had 2 different champions in the past 37 years, you're not a very competitive league. But I don't know. Maybe it's they speak English over there. Well, I mean, allegedly they speak English. I don't think it's very good English. I guess so. There's a similarity that it's a common tongue over there. It's close to England, where a lot of these players might aspire to play. I imagine that the lifestyle isn't too bad. The weather's probably a bit rubbish, although we've had a bit of wet and cold weather here in Australia of late, so it's not particularly good. But I think the clubs they're signing to, the likes of Hearts and Hibs, they're good. They're good little competitive European teams. I mean, they're nowhere near like Celtic or Rangers or any other teams in the top 5, but I think it's a good stepping stone moving forward.
And I think that's the thing. Yeah, it's a launch pad into Europe, and it's actually quite a safe launch pad for Australian players who the style of football is really not too different. It's fairly physical kind of football. It's fast paced. I think something that has affected things more recently is with Brexit. There's less opportunities for overseas players to get into England. You have to have played so many games for the national team. And so it's a lot harder to get into England nowadays. And so you have to find other ways. And Scotland definitely has the opportunities for young Australian players. I think it's definitely helped as well Ange Postecoglou. We can't underestimate the impact that he has had in Scotland over this last season, just showing Scotland and Europe and some people who kind of slated Australian football 12 months ago when he was announced, actually 12 months today when we're recording. Maybe that mindset has changed a little bit and people are going, oh, okay, right. Australia has some decent talent.
Yeah, and I think we've had the history of the guys, like we've said before, about Moore and Viduka, and where they went from there. Obviously, Viduka went to Leeds and really performed on a much bigger worldwide audience than he was at Celtic, which is a good thing looking forward to these guys, because we know what Cammy Devlin, Nathaniel Atkinson, Kye Rowles, all these guys, we know their talent, and if they continue down this road, they could be going to bigger clubs in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, some of these clubs, Hibs, Hearts, they're not in the top two, but they're clubs that definitely can be making Europa Conference League now that that's a thing. So you've got the Champions League, the Europa League, and then the Conference League. So there's plenty of European football, and they're clubs that are in around that competition. That's a window into lots of different European football clubs. And from there, you can make some pretty decent moves. So absolutely, I think it's a great shop window for young Aussie players. You look at the players who are going over to, they're young, but they've also, I think, benefited from the last 2 years of COVID, where they got a lot of football in the A-League. You know, Cammy Devlin was playing week in, week out for Wellington. And that really, showed people what he had. And Nathaniel Atkinson was getting regular game time over those last 2 seasons for City and doing really well. Kye Rowles is a really interesting one, because a couple of years ago when Mariners were in the spoon positions, he was a real young centre back and was copping it week in, week out. But he just kept going and improving. And these last 2 seasons, they've gone from that team that was struggling to being a real competitive team, making the finals for the last 2 seasons. And Kye Rowles has been at the center of that opportunity to get consistent game time has now made him ready for Europe, for
and he's been caught up. He's been caught up to the Socceroos as well. So the past 12 months has been massive for him.
Yeah, and Lewis Miller is the same, playing week in, week out for the Mariners. It's been a really good time of development. And they're all still, Keanu Baccus, the same for Wanderers. They're all still young. They're all still kind of that 24, 23 years old. They can really step into the prime of their careers over the next couple of years. And what a place to be doing it. I mean, yeah, fantastic eyes in Scotland. And I think Cammy Devlin and Atkinson really showed this season that, they can match it in the Scottish Prem. It's been fantastic to watch. So it is exciting to think where these guys can go, and to create a link between Scotland and Australia where we can develop players and that can be their way into Europe. And of course, it works the other way as well. We've got Cumdog come over from Scotland to play in the A-League and done fantastically. So awesome things happening. I love it. And we've got one of the clubs is still apparently sticking to their agreement to come out to Australia, Celtic, or the Rangers still aren't coming. So there's another link. It's good things happening. And I say it's probably one of the most fruitful links Australian football's ever had to Europe.
Yeah, and it seems like we get an idea of where our league is kind of at compared to Europe. I don't think we'll ever properly understand it. But, Nathaniel Atkinson has gone from a championship-winning Melbourne City team into Hearts, which I think last season were the best-performing team outside the Old Firm. And he was a regular starter. And so I think, we could probably say our league is probably at a similar level to Scotland. And Scotland's not a top 10 league, but it's a decent league. It was probably a lot stronger back in the day, but, it's still good. It's still a decent little league. So I think it's good to know where we're at as a competition as well.
The real measure of that will be if we can get a player into the Celtic or Rangers kind of starting lineup week in, week out. I think there definitely is still that gap between those top 2 clubs, the Old Firm and the rest. And so, Tom Rogic, he's never really been a regular at Celtic. I think his injury problems and things have kind of tampered with that. But he's been the level. He's been the standout, and he is one of Australia's best. So it would be great to see that next kind of group of Aussie youngsters hitting those heights and going on from there. We've got McGree in the championship. That's fantastic. We've got Francois, who's, a junior at Fulham, but now has the chance to play in the Premier League, which is fantastic. We've got Aiden Hrustic, who's a UEFA Europa League winner. That's fantastic. So I think there's bright futures for Australians over in Europe, but we also have to remember it's not 20 years ago. It's not the golden generation, where we're going to have 13 players in the Premier League.
Yeah.
That's just not realistic at this stage. But I also think the way world football has kind of evolved, that the Premier League has become an absolute pinnacle. So if we've got players playing in other European competitions, I think that's good. And it shows that technical ability can transfer. So yeah, bring it on. I can't wait to see one of the Quoll brothers, just surely they're the next lot to go overseas and really just blow up.
There's a lot, and I think it's probably a video we can do later on in the off season. There's a lot to be excited about the talent we have. Yeah, they're not playing in the Premier League, but that's okay because the Premier League isn't the bee's knees, and the Premier League, I think, is a lot stronger than it was when Cahill and Viduka and Kewell were at their prime playing in the Premier League. It's just gone to a complete new level. And so it's probably hard to get into the Premier League. And that's okay if they're not playing in it because the Premier League isn't the end of the world. I mean, Hrustic will be playing in the Champions League next year with Eintracht Frankfurt. That's still massive. But it's not the Premier League, and that's okay. We've got plenty of guys going overseas, and they're going well, and there's a lot to be excited about. But unfortunately, I think a lot of people, and maybe some of us here in Australia that aren't Eurosoms, are probably a bit guilty of it, of thinking, oh, they're not in the Premier League. They're not in England. Well, it's okay if they're not in England. We've got Awer Mabil, who's just signed for Cadiz, who's just been, I think, promoted from the second division up into La Liga in Spain. So there's a lot to be excited for.
Absolutely. It's, I think that just pushes the emphasis, though. I think if we can see the way that when A-League clubs have to focus on their youth and actually give them regular game time, that we see players really develop. And I think for me, that's one of the biggest reasons a national second division would actually help Australian football, because it gives players that higher level football that they can play week in, week out and learn their trade, and then step up into the first division if they're ready, and, play week in, week out, and then make those moves. I think at the moment, the NPL is just not quite the same level as the A-League, and there's quite a gap there. And so I think getting minutes, a longer season as well, would be fantastic. That's something we've talked about as well. Our players are only playing 26 matches. If they make it all the way to the grand final, it's now 29 matches. Play two semis and a final. So we need to extend the season a bit longer and give them the opportunity to develop their trade week in, week out, playing football, getting that season longer and longer, not having a 5-month off season. But, they're all problems that, at the moment still aren't stopping our youngsters getting good opportunities. So it's fantastic. Yeah.
Cool. Well, we might leave it there, and thanks for watching if you've joined us this far. Looking forward to, maybe we'll get a bit more Scottish Premiership. Maybe Optus can pick it up now, considering we have so many Aussies on it. Although it is on BN Sports, so if you've got Foxtel, get around it next year. But also get around the A-League too. Don't forget about that. And get around the Couch Critics. Give us a like, share the video, let us know in the comments what you make of all these Aussies going over to Scotland. And thanks for joining us. We'll see you in the next one.